When Ulysses S. Grant became General-in-Chief of the Federal Army in March 1864, he and President Lincoln permitted the Army to take or destroy of civilian property deemed useful to the Confederate war effort. They wanted not only to destroy supplies, livestock, and food meant for Confederate armies, but also to erode the Southern people's support for secession. Philip Sheridan, who carried out this strategy in Shenandoah Valley, said, "Those who rest at home in peace and plenty see but little of the horrors of war and even grow indifferent to them as the struggle goes on. It is another matter, however, when deprivation and suffering are brought to their own doors. Death is popularly considered the maximum of punishment in war, but it is not. Reduction to poverty brings prayers for peace more surely and more quickly than does the destruction of human life." Before we start, if you believe these stories deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and become a part of our community. It is the second week of October 1864. The air in the Shenandoah Valley is incredibly thick, but it isn't the morning mist rolling off the Blue Ridge Mountains. The smoke, black, greasy, suffocating smoke that stretches in a continuous, unbroken cloud for 30 miles. Major General Philip Sheridan is sitting atop his massive, fiercely temperamental black horse, Rienzi. He isn't looking through his field glasses for a Confederate battle line. Not today. He's looking at his pocket watch. Behind him, thousands of Union cavalrymen are fanning out across the most fertile, pristine agricultural land in the American South. They aren't unholstering their breech-loading carbines. They are reaching for matches, torches, and heavy iron sledgehammers. Sheridan is a remarkably short, intensely aggressive man. Soldiers call him Little Phil, though never to his face, but his psychological shadow is currently eclipsing the entire Confederacy. He isn't just acting as a cavalry commander today. He is operating as a psychological engineer of mass destruction. He looked out at the lush, golden fields of the Shenandoah and basically said, "If I take their food, I take their will to exist." Think about it. We are conditioned to view military history as a clash of armed men on a designated field. But imagine you are a veteran Confederate soldier under Robert E. Lee. You are currently trapped, freezing, and starving in the muddy, disease-ridden trenches of Petersburg, Virginia. For months, the only thing keeping you from deserting is the dream of the bread and beef coming from your family's farm in the valley. Then the mail arrives. You get a letter from your wife. It doesn't bring news of a glorious victory. It says the massive timber barns are gone, reduced to white ash. The dairy cows have been shot and left to rot in the fields. Your children are digging through the freezing mud, eating roots and weeds just to survive another week. Suddenly, the primary enemy isn't the Union soldier standing across the trench line aiming a rifle at your head. The primary enemy is the agonizing hunger in your children's stomachs. This is the precise moment the United States military stopped trying to win a localized armed rebellion and started trying to end a civilization's physical capacity to sustain life. So here's the situation. Why is Sheridan setting fire to civilian farms instead of fighting armies? To understand this brutal shift, we have to look at the 3 years of humiliating failure that led to it. For the entirety of the Civil War, the Shenandoah Valley has been a massive, bleeding thorn in the side of the Union. Geographically, it is the backdoor to Washington. It's a natural, protected highway bounded by massive mountain ranges. Because the valley runs geographically northeast, a Southern army can march swiftly down it, completely shielded from Union eyes, and suddenly appear on the literal doorstep of the United States Capitol in a matter of days. But it's far more than just a convenient invasion route. It's a massive open-air factory. In 1864, the valley is practically the only thing keeping Lee's formidable army of Northern Virginia from starving to death. It produces millions of bushels of wheat, thousands of head of cattle, and the massive quantities of forage and hay required to keep the Confederate cavalry and artillery horses moving. Without the valley, the Southern war machine physically grinds to a halt. Before Sheridan arrived, the Union approached this region with a certain level of naive restraint. They operated under an unspoken, antiquated rule of civilized warfare. You fought the uniformed soldiers and you left the civilian infrastructure alone. Union generals like Franz Sigel and David Hunter had marched into the valley, tried to fight traditional, polite battles, and were violently thrown back out by Confederate forces. It was an endless loop of Northern failure. By the summer of 1864, the Gentlemen's War was officially dead and buried. General Ulysses S. Grant takes command of all Union armies, and he has zero patience for this cycle. He looks at the brutal, bloody stalemate he is currently fighting in Virginia, and he realizes a dark, modern truth. He can't just kill Confederate soldiers. To win, he has to permanently sever the Confederate logistics chain. He handpicks Philip Sheridan for the job. Why Sheridan? Because Sheridan possesses absolutely no sentimentality. He is a brawler from Ohio who doesn't believe in the romance of the chivalrous war. He believes exclusively in the terrifying arithmetic of total war. To ensure there is no misunderstanding, Grant sends Sheridan a telegram. We know exactly what Grant was thinking because this official dispatch still survives in the official records of the War of the Rebellion. Grant's orders are chillingly absolute. He explicitly instructs Sheridan to give the enemy no rest, do all the damage to railroads and crops you can. Sheridan reads these orders, folds the paper, and prepares for what history will grimly remember as the burning. Sheridan doesn't just ride blindly into the valley and start throwing matches. He is a methodical killer. He waits. He spends the entire month of September violently, systematically dismantling the Confederate military presence in the valley. In a series of sharp, incredibly bloody engagements at the battles of Winchester and Fisher's Hill, he uses his massive numerical superiority to smash the army of Confederate General Jubal Early. He breaks their military strength first, sending them reeling southward in disarray. Once the Confederate army is broken and retreating, Sheridan realizes he has a terrifying window of absolute, uncontested freedom. He turns his massive army around, spreads his cavalry from mountain range to mountain range, and begins a slow, methodical march back north toward the Union lines at Winchester. But as they march, they initiate the Scorched. Imagine the sheer, terrifying scale of this operation. Sheridan's cavalrymen form a continuous, unbroken line across the entire 30-mile width of the valley. They move like a slow-motion, mechanized scythe of fire. We know exactly what this looked like from the ground level because soldiers wrote home about it. One Union cavalryman from a Pennsylvania regiment detailed the eerie, mechanical silence of the operation in his diary. There were no glorious cavalry charges. There were no battle cries or beating drums. Just the endless, deafening crackle of dry hay and ancient timber catching fire. They systematically destroy over 2,000 massive wooden barns, filled to the roof with the autumn harvest. But they go further. They target the technology of survival. They burn over 70 grist mills, the massive, expensive stone structures powered by water wheels that local farmers use to grind hard wheat into edible flour. Without those mills, even if a farmer managed to hide a sack of wheat in the woods, they couldn't process it into bread. They slaughter or drive off every cow, sheep, and pig they find. For days, the rivers actually run red with the blood of slaughtered livestock that the Union Army couldn't carry with them. Here is the catch. Sheridan isn't doing this out of blind, emotional hatred. He isn't a sadist acting out of anger. He's doing it because he completely understands the cold math of modern warfare. A dead enemy soldier is just one less musket on the firing line. But a burned barn? A burned barn is 1,000 less meals. It starves the soldier, it starves his horse, and it starves the civilian infrastructure supporting him. He gathers his cavalry commanders and urges his men. The people must be left nothing but their eyes to weep with over the war. As the sun sets over the valley during those 2 weeks in October, the sky stays a brilliant, unnatural orange long after the natural daylight should have faded. Thousands of families, mostly women, children, and the elderly, as the military-aged men are all at the front, stand on their porches. They watch helplessly as their entire life's work, their generational wealth, and their only means of surviving the approaching winter vanish in a matter of minutes. There is no court of appeal. There is no negotiation or plea for mercy. There is only the match, the smoke, and the silence that follows. But here is where the friction of war violently interrupts Sheridan's perfectly calculated math. The Confederates aren't just passively watching their homeland burn to ashes. They are getting desperate. And in warfare, A starving, desperate enemy with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous enemy on the board. It is now October 19, 1864. The Confederate commander, General Jubal Early, sees a fleeting, suicidal opening. Sheridan is temporarily away from his army, having traveled to Washington, D.C., for a strategic meeting with the War Department. His massive Union army is camped along the banks of Cedar Creek. They are feeling incredibly safe, fat on captured Confederate livestock, and feeling completely confident that the war in the valley has been permanently won. They are highly complacent. They aren't digging adequate defensive trenches. They aren't posting heavy pickets. Under the cover of an incredibly dense, blinding autumn fog, Jubal Early's starving Confederates launch a massive, coordinated surprise attack. It is a masterpiece of tactical stealth and desperate aggression. They cross the creek in absolute silence and smash directly into the flank of the Union 8 Corps, while thousands of Northern men are still asleep in their canvas bedrolls. The shock is absolute. The Union line collapses almost instantly. It isn't an orderly retreat. It is a total blind panic. Thousands of Union soldiers throw down their loaded rifles, abandon their artillery pieces, and run in terror toward the town of Winchester, miles away. The Confederates sweep through the captured camps, immediately stopping to ravenously eat the breakfasts the Union soldiers left cooking over the fires. For a few hours, it looks as though the burning is about to end in a humiliating, disastrous Union defeat. The psychological dominance Sheridan had built is shattering into a million pieces. Sheridan is resting 20 miles away in the town of Winchester. He has just returned from Washington and is eating his own breakfast when he hears it. The dull, heavy, unmistakable thud of massed artillery rolling across the valley floor. He doesn't wait for a courier to arrive with an official report. He doesn't call a cautious council of war with his staff. He immediately orders his black warhorse, Rienzi, to be saddled. He leaps onto the horse and begins what will become the most famous, romanticized, and consequential horseback ride in American military history. He gallops at breakneck speed down the valley pike, heading directly toward the sound of the guns. As he nears the front lines, the awful reality becomes clear. He starts meeting the massive tidal wave of his own retreating army. The roads are choked with bleeding, broken, and terrified Union soldiers. They have lost their commanding officers, they have abandoned their equipment, and they have entirely lost their psychological nerve. A lesser general would have ordered his provost guard to shoot the fleeing men for desertion. A traditional commander would have tried to form a defensive barricade to stop the bleeding. Not Sheridan. He doesn't plead. He rides directly into the mass of retreating men, taking his hat off and waving it wildly in the air. His face is a mask of pure, unadulterated, aggressive confidence. He stands in the stirrups and screams at the top of his lungs, his voice cutting through the panic. "Face the other way, boys! Face the other way! If I had been here, this never would have happened. We are going back to our camps. We are going to lick them out of their boots." The psychological effect is instantaneous. It is like a bolt of lightning hitting the broken army. The men actually stop running. They look at this short, furious man on a black horse, and the panic evaporates. They turn around. They start cheering wildly. Sheridan's sheer force of personality, his utter refusal to accept the reality of a defeat, acts as a physical, psychological barrier to their fear. Sheridan doesn't just halt the retreat. He actively channels their reclaimed energy. He spends the next few hours riding the reformed battle lines, letting every single man see that he is back in command. That afternoon, he organizes a massive, coordinated counterattack. The Union Army hits the exhausted, disorganized Confederates with the force of a tidal wave. They don't just beat Early's army, they utterly annihilate it. They capture all of their lost artillery, take thousands of prisoners, and shatter the Confederate presence in the Shenandoah forever. The threat to Washington's backdoor is permanently slammed shut and deadbolt. But the true, historical resolution of Sheridan's campaign isn't found on the bloody, smoke-covered battlefield of Cedar Creek. It is found in the bitter, freezing winter that inevitably follows. Think back to the profound quote from our intro. Sheridan believed, to his core, that reduction to poverty brings prayers for peace more surely and more quickly than does the destruction of human life. That winter, the families remaining in the Shenandoah Valley have absolutely nothing. The temperature drops. The snow falls on blackened, empty foundations. There is no flour for bread. There is no salted meat in the cellars. There are no seeds preserved for the spring planting. Word of this total devastation quickly reaches the Confederate trenches outside of Richmond and Petersburg. The Confederate soldiers from the valley begin deserting Lee's army in staggering, unprecedented droves. We know this because the Confederate provost marshals recorded the massive spike in AWOL soldiers. These men aren't leaving the army because they are cowards afraid of Union bullets. They are leaving because Philip Sheridan brought the horrific, unvarnished reality of war directly to their front doors. They are leaving because they are forced to make an impossible choice between their political cause and the literal, physical survival of their starving wives and children. Grant's ruthless, calculated plan worked flawlessly. By the time Sheridan is finished with his grim work, he sends a final report back to Grant's headquarters. It is a document chilling in its bureaucratic accuracy. He basically says, "I have destroyed the valley. I have burned 2,000 barns filled with wheat and hay and farming implements. If a crow wants to fly down the Shenandoah, he must carry his own provisions." Think about that immense paradigm shift for a second. For centuries, we have been conditioned to see military generals celebrated for their strategic genius in outflanking an enemy on a designated battlefield. But Sheridan's genius was infinitely darker and far more modern. He realized that the soldier holding the rifle in the field is merely the sharp tip of the spear. If you want to permanently break the spear, you don't fight the tip, you melt down the forge that made it. He didn't just fight soldiers, he fought the very abstract idea of the Confederacy. And in the blackened, starving ruins of the Shenandoah, he won. Sheridan proved to the world that the most rapid, effective way to break an army's ability to fight is to systematically break the heart and the stomach of the civilian population supporting it. But Sheridan's philosophy didn't end in the smoke of Virginia. Years later, he repurposed the "leave them nothing" doctrine to reshape the American West. Facing the highly mobile Plains Indian tribes, Sheridan realized he didn't need to hunt every warrior. He simply applied the same cold math he perfected in the Shenandoah. He targeted the supply chain. The buffalo were the commissary of the Plains tribes, providing their food, clothing, and shelter. Sheridan looked at the vast herds and essentially said, "If the buffalo are gone, the resistance is gone." He didn't rely on cavalry charges. He protected and encouraged the industrial slaughter of millions of bison by commercial hunters. By erasing their food source, he forced independent nations onto reservations through the same reduction to poverty he used against the Confederacy. This is the gritty reality often glossed over. Wars aren't always won by brilliant maneuvers, but by commanders willing to destroy the very things that make life possible. Sheridan was the unyielding instrument of a government that decided the cost of peace was the total destruction of the enemy's world. He rose to the rank of general of the army and never offered an apology. In his mechanical mind, he had brought prayers for peace, the only way he knew how, by leaving his enemy with nothing else to pray for.